focused on why you want to do this. For me, it's a love of science. I really, really genuinely love seeing things that no one's seen before, trying to unravel, the way in which the spinal cord changes over early life and how drugs manipulate that whole process, that kind of thing. It's really, really interesting. And keep that at the forefront of your mind. Look for opportunities. Don't be reserved. Sometimes you've got to have pointy elbows. I'm not a very gregarious and outgoing person, but sometimes you've got to stand up for yourself and say, no, I want to do this. And hopefully you're working with people and working for people that are supportive. I think that's really key.
Hello and welcome to Meet the Medicine Makers. I'm Menashe, an early career drug discovery scientist, and this podcast shares real stories from people in drug discovery and development, how they built their careers, the decisions they made, and the realities of working in the field. This includes not just industry, but also the academic research that underpins how new medicines are discovered and developed. Today, I'm joined by Professor Gareth Hathway, Professor of Neuroscience and the head of the Physiology, Pharmacology and Neuroscience Research Division in the School of Life Science at the University of Nottingham. In this episode, we'll explore what it's really like to navigate a career in academia, from early expectations to challenges around funding, teaching, and balancing research with life outside of it. Gareth, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure.
So we'll start at the beginning. To start, could you take me back to the beginning of your career journey? How did you first find your way into research and academia?
Probably by accident, I would say. I was first in family to go to university. So, yeah, I was told not to bother to apply to go to university by my A-level chemistry teacher. So, I kind of persevered there. Um, I went to Cardiff and did pharmacology in Cardiff. It turns out I was much better at degree level than I was at A level. Did all right. And then I was in my final year of my undergraduate degree, and it's kind of like, what am I going to do? I need a job. But I'm slightly snobbish, I guess. I was on a degree course where there were lots of intercalated medical students, and they were going to have doctor before their name, and I wasn't. And I thought, well, I'm just as clever as they are. So I don't want to be a medic. I don't think I'm good enough with people. So let's see if I can do some PhDs. So I just started applying for PhDs and was offered some and chose one and went ahead and did my PhD, which was great. Had a really nice time. Sponsored by Glaxo in Cambridge in pharmacology again. And then, figured out pretty early that I wanted to be my own boss, kind of do what I was interested in. Um, Money would have been nice in the pharmaceutical industry, but it's shifting sands and you can move very quickly. Whereas I thought, no, I'm probably, my personality is more suited to academia. So it was like, okay, post PhD, let's apply for postdocs. And so that's what I did. And kind of stumbled into pain research more than anything, rather than a great plan.
And for anyone who might not be familiar, could you briefly explain your area of research and sort of what your role now involves sort of day to day?
So my area of research that I'm interested in is pain, um, especially how pain in early life is detected and processed, and how that then influences the way we experience pain and our susceptibility to chronic pain when we're adults. So we do lots of kind of basic fundamental mechanistic research, in vivo, ex vivo, in vitro, some human-based studies as well, which is great and really interesting, but quite difficult to do. And yeah, and my job, so I'm on a research and teaching contract, so roughly 40% of my job is research, 40% of my job is teaching, and 20% of my job is scholarship, that kind of stuff as well, which is great. So it's a nice kind of balance of things. So yeah, I lead my research teams and work with my collaborators, and I teach on the neuroscience degrees here at Nottingham and also on the medical degree as well.
So you said that you kind of stumbled across sort of getting into a PhD and going down the academia. So academia wasn't something that you dreamt about as a child. Uh,
No, my dad worked in a factory and my mum was a nurse. I'd never been to a university. When I went to university in the early 1990s, you had to go for interviews. I'd never been to a
mm.
university before I went for an interview. I knew nothing about it at all. No, so I didn't know what an academic was until I met one.
And when you compare those early expectations of, okay, you've just started your PhD and you're thinking about your career, how do those early expectations of a life in academia compare to the reality of now being an academic?
Um, well, one of the reasons why I chose academia was until very recently, it was seen as a very secure job.
Mm.
You know, you got if you were the American term tenured, not that that exists in the UK any longer, but if you had an academic job, then it was pretty much guaranteed that that was a job for life as long as you did your job well, you know, taught well, researched well, and that kind of stability really was attractive to me because, like I said, my dad and my mum, my dad especially, he worked in a factory. He was made redundant a lot when I was a kid, and that really impacted on me, scarred me.
Mm.
So I didn't want that, and so I wanted something that was more stable. And yeah, I kind of stumbled into it because I didn't have any background in it, and I've just been. I mean, I say this to my undergraduate students and postgrad students really as well. I've been very, very, very lucky
Mm.
that I've been in the right place at the right time, and I've been, you know, very lucky to work with under the supervision of some very, very clever and encouraging people that have really helped me. And I've taken advantage of opportunities when they've arisen.
Mm.
And again, that's not. I'm very poor at chess. I don't have a great strategy, but I kind of follow my nose and my gut, and I know what's what. So yeah, that's how I did. I stumbled into it.
You've mentioned meeting key people in your career journey, people who potentially really helped you. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
I mean, the first one was my A-level chemistry teacher. I wanted to show him what was what. And I did get the opportunity to do that um, after I left my degree. So he's a great, he still is a great motivator, but in a negative way. Um, so I won't say what his name is or was. He's probably dead now. But yeah, that's still one. Academically, my PhD supervisor was a great inspiration, a guy called Pat Humphrey. So he'd led the development of the triptan groups of anti-migraine drugs at Glaxo, all the way from his post-PhD period right the way through drug development, through the preclinical, clinical phases, through marketing, made Glaxo an awful lot of money. Um, so much money that they gave him this whole floor of the first floor of the pharmacology building at Cambridge, which is where I did my PhD. And he was a real inspiration in terms of he had a vision, he knew what he wanted to do, he was able to motivate teams to explore things, try to understand. It was a really good example of how basic research underpins
Yeah.
pharmaceutical development, that kind of translational pathway, which has always been attracted to me, how we turn fundamental ideas into possible routes for drug discovery going forward. So Pat was um, a really good pharmacologist and a really big inspiration to me. And then after my PhD, I was looking for postdocs, and I saw an advert in those days. It was physical copies of Nature that you had to go into Nature and look at the back. And there was an advert for the Wellcome London Pain Consortium that had just been awarded, and it was in London, and it wasn't that far away. And they had a list of projects, and there was one to do in vivo electrophysiology in mice, and I'd done lots of in vivo microdialysis and neurochemistry, and I fancied learning to do some electrophysiology. So I went down and interviewed for the consortium, and I was very lucky that I was offered that job. And there were some really big names in pain in the Wellcome London Pain Consortium: Steve McMahon, Tony Dickinson, John Wood, Andrew Rice, Martin Kolzenberg, some big names. But the big name I ended up working for was Mariah Fitzgerald. I'm working in her lab, and again, she is a real inspiration. Someone who really pioneered a whole field in terms of early life pain and how pain is perceived, processed, and managed in children. And yeah, that I learned how to do electrophysiology. She gave me huge amounts of leeway to explore what I found interesting. Um, I pain research at that time was quite spinally focused, and Mariah's work had all been in the spinal cord. My PhD had been up in the brain, and we kind of met halfway in the
Okay.
brainstem. And that was, yeah, really good. And she really encouraged me and helped me develop as a scientist, and I'm eternally grateful for that. And yeah, and then I was looking for a job, a proper job, this job that was going to provide me with security. And I was lucky. Um, this place was advertising, and it was at that point, one of those sliding doors moments. I was offered a job at Glaxo, and I was offered a job here at Nottingham on the same day, literally within an hour and a half of each other, and I had to make a big decision, and I opted to stay in academia.
So what drove you to stay? Because like those are two really big potential offers. What made you decide, okay, let's go down this road versus this road?
Well, earlier in my career, during my end of my PhD, I'd been offered a job in industry in America, and I chickened out of it because I'm not very adventurous in terms of moving. And I think my heart has. I would love the pay that would come with working in the pharmaceutical industry, um, but I think my heart is in academic science and kind of fundamental. I always say, trying to understand how the machine works rather than trying to fix it before we understand how the machine works, which is my rather naive perception sometimes of how the pharmaceutical industry works. So I just like to, I want to see things that no one's ever seen before, and I want to be able to explore my interests, which is what my job at the moment allows me to do, which is great.
We need sort of good academic research to underpin any of the future medicines we do. So I can really understand. So we've touched a little bit about sort of funding and job security. I think now more than anything, when anyone's thinking about what sort of job they want to do, those will be sort of the top things they'll consider. How have you experienced sort of funding and job security, whether positively, negatively, throughout? How have you experienced that throughout your career?
So in terms of job security is a big thing for me. Like I've alluded to already, it was really kind of a motivator. I have no safety net, had no safety net. There was no kind of family money I could fall back on or anything. So I knew I had to have a job. Um, no matter at the end, following my PhD, following my postdoc. And when you're a postdoc in academia, it's 2, 3 year contracts, and at the end of that period of time you've got to find another job. You've got to hope, if you're staying where you were, you've got to hope that the grant comes in that you've hopefully put in with your boss, or the fellowship that you've put in. And you're at a period in your life, probably in your mid late 20s, where you're looking to make some major life decisions, and so it's really, really, really tricky, and navigating it is nerve-wracking. I think really stressful, and you've really got to be resilient. If you're on your own, I guess that presents its own kind of challenges. But if you're with someone, or you've got a young family as well, then it's so hard to know, where are we going to live? Where are the kids going to go to school? Um, you probably, your partner's got a job as well. So if I've got a job here, can you move as well? It's really, really, really difficult. And I don't think there's a one size fits all approach to it. But you can understand, perhaps, it's just occurred to me why so much research is kind of focused in the UK within, London, Oxford, Cambridge, because geographically it's relatively close, and there's lots of opportunities there. Whereas, like, even Nottingham, which is what, an hour and a half away on the train from London, that kind of density of career opportunities, it's not the same as it is down in the southeast. So yeah, you then have to think about compromises and
Yeah.
stuff, which makes for very awkward conversations and hard conversations and big decisions, and you're never sure if it's the right choice you make. You've just got to decide and commit, I think.
And what advice would you have? Because it sounds like you've had a lot of experience navigating this side of academia. Like, what advice would you give maybe an early career researcher who's thinking about all these questions and topics that you've just mentioned?
At forefront of my mind and the forefront of anybody's mind, I think, is to really keep it focused on why you want to do this. What, for me, it's a love of science. That sounds really cheesy, but I really, really genuinely love seeing things that no one's seen before, trying to unravel, the way in which the spinal cord changes over early life and how drugs manipulate that whole process, that kind of thing. It's really, really interesting. And keep that at the forefront of your mind. Look for opportunities. Um, don't be reserved. Sometimes you've got to have pointy elbows. I'm not a very gregarious and outgoing person, but sometimes you've got to stand up for yourself and say, no, I want to do this. And hopefully you're working with people and working for people that are supportive. I think that's really key. If you're looking for postdocs, you're looking for PhDs, you're looking for postdocs, you really want to be working with a supervisory team and a wider community that support you and develop you, that will help you write those fellowship applications, that will say, I know my colleague in X has got postdocs coming up. I really think you should do it. Or there's this big conference you're going to, that I think you should go to, because that would be a great opportunity to find places to do that, to find a job. Um, when I was offered this job, I didn't know what to do. Uh, I'm a small C conservative in regards of my, not my political views, but my kind of outlook on life. I'm quite nervous about things. And Mariah said to me, it was a Monday morning, she just said, well, I've discussed this with my husband and we've decided you've just got to go. You've got to go. It's too good an opportunity. And I wanted to stay. I was desperate to stay, because I was comfortable there. I knew what I was doing, but she was exactly right. I had to take the big, brave decision. So it's really, when you're choosing a PhD, if you're lucky enough to be able to choose a postdoc, it's finding someone supportive that will help you develop a career. That's really key, and that's something I try and do. I'm the people that work with me, I'm very honest. I say, obviously I'm in this for me. I want data so that I can get papers, so that we can get more grant money. But equally, I'm here to help you build a career. You're my legacy. The people that come through my lab are my legacy. I've given up on FRS and statues and things like that in the future. What my legacy is my PhD students, my postdocs, and they go on. They're again, a cliche. They're the next generation, and that's where I see I get a lot of satisfaction from that as well. So supportive networks. That's what you really need.
For someone who perhaps is looking around their network and it's like, oh, I actually don't have very supportive networks, what advice would you give them to sort of building that supportive network?
Or you're really asking the wrong person about going out there and using social media and stuff like that. I think colleagues at the same level, finding PhD students, master students, other postdocs who perhaps have a supportive network and plug into it. You know, um, my wife, when she was doing her PhD, her supervisor probably was on the other side of the supportive spectrum than perhaps I'd done, and she accessed other academics who were willing to support her and help her as well. And there are lots of people, most people out there will help you, even if you're not a kind of direct student or postdoc for them. People want to see people succeed. They want to see fields move forward. We want, within our school, we want all of our PhD students to succeed, no matter who supervised them. They could be working on something very, very far removed from pain or neuroscience in general. We still want to see them succeed because their success is our wider success. So it's probably accessing your social network, your friendship groups, your peers, and plugging into their networks as well. So some people are just very good at it. Some people are just very good at going out there and advertising themselves and being sociable, but especially scientists, I think, we're a bit more reserved and less able to do that. So, yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
sure what the right answer is.
No, this is really great advice. Now, switching gears slightly, at the start of the podcast, you mentioned that you have your research and the work that you do, but you also do teaching. On your profile, you mentioned that something teaching is something you really enjoy, and it's a really important part of your role. How does teaching and your teaching responsibility fit into your career, and how do you sort of approach it?
I do love teaching. Um, it gives you feedback immediately, which research doesn't always. Um, how do I fit it in? I actually the honest answer is that the research has to fit in around the teaching because if you've got timetable teaching, it can't be moved. So you have to do it. The assessments have to be assessed, but the students have got to write. They expect the marks to be back at a certain time, so you've just got to do it. Um, I when I interviewed for this job, somebody gave me a piece of advice here. I was looking, he said, don't volunteer for anything. And I ignored that. And um, I volunteered for everything, teaching wise. And that gave me a really good feel of how the degree was structured, what was good about it, what was our USP, and that kind of thing. I enjoy teaching everything from kind of didactic lecture based stuff, small group teaching. We kind of pioneered a little bit in terms of laboratory practicals and feedback to students and just philosophical things. Myself and one of my old postdocs in Devonshire, who's now academic down in Exeter, we developed a neuroscience outreach program. So, but we incorporated it as part of undergraduate dissertations, research dissertations. So we went into primary schools and got the kids gambling to try and understand if a gambling task would help them learn neurosciencey things. We saw like 10, 12,000 kids over 5 years doing that, which was really, really, really good. And we got two great publications out of it, which was amazing. PLOS Biology and PLOS One with our undergraduate students, which was great all the way through to dissertation projects, like I said, which is again challenging. It's great. It's a real privilege. It's frustrating at times. There's lots of bureaucracy and admin, but I think it's a real benefit of working at a university is being able to talk to younger people and kind of try and infuse them with some of the passion that you've got for a topic and then let them go and do whatever they want to do in life, which is always nice to see.
And I mean, you've already mentioned like the rewarding parts of teaching, the feedback, and also the challenges, sort of the bureaucracy. And so, what advice would you give to someone who is maybe like sort of seeing the teaching opportunities and is kind of undecided whether or not they should go for them or whether they should sort of just leave?
To my former colleague was right. You shouldn't volunteer for everything because primarily your research is how you will be judged. Um, how much you commit to it is kind of it's down to you as an individual, I guess. Some people are really good at research, and they don't have the same kind of feeling for teaching that perhaps I do, and that's absolutely fine. I think academia is a mixed environment, and we have two core deliverables. That's deliver our research, get grant money, publish papers, and also deliver teaching. I like a fairly even split. The problem comes is if you volunteer for doing too much, you end up with a very inflated workload, and that then impacts on everything else in your life as well, which can be tricky to navigate. But having a plan, doing what you want to do, if you're in that privileged position of being able to choose what you want to do. I always took the attitude it's better to volunteer for something I want to do than not volunteer and then subsequently down the line be given something to do that you don't want to do.
And I think part of sort of the advice about volunteering is being able to balance your workload.
Yeah.
And I think this brings us on to our sort of next topic on balancing work-life balance. I think that can be a challenge not just in academia but in any job. And this is actually how I came across you in your research because you've spoken openly about the challenges of balancing work and life. At what point did balancing work and the life outside of it becomes something that you had to actively think about?
Um, Probably when my first child was born, actively think about it. I was still at UCL then. We were living our train ride, not drive. I don't drive trains. Away. I'd always During my PhD, I realized that I worked best in the morning. And so I was like in the lab at 4 in the morning. Not that I advocate that at all. I I wake up early. Let's just be productive. And so got in the lab early, got my experiments done early, which meant that, and then I could socialize with people and whatever. And I carried that through my commute into London. Got a train very early. I was first in the lab. This had two advantages. I was in early, but also I was always the first person that my boss saw. I was always the first person. So I said hello to them, whoever that was. And so that always gave me the opportunity to update them on what I was doing. But it also meant starting early meant I could finish early. So when I had my children, I mean, this kind of more, you know, more significantly impacted when I was here. When I came here, it meant that although I didn't see the kids in the morning, I saw the kids in the evening. It meant that I was always there when they were eating for their tea, or sometimes I could pick them up from school. It meant I was there for that time. And because I work well in the evening, as well as realised that I work well in the morning, I realised I work terribly in the evening. I don't get anything productive done. So that kind of I shift my time zone. I'm probably somewhere in Finland and have always been in Finland. You know, I'm a couple of hours ahead of everybody else in the UK. So it just means that I got to do things. So I do work in the evenings and at weekends sometimes, but I don't have to because I structure my time so that it's as organized as it can be and I get most things done in the mornings.
And yeah, I think that is always the challenge. How do you balance life and how do you balance work? And you mentioned sort of your first child, so you're a parent. So, how did becoming a parent influence the way you approached your career and your time? I guess not just day to day, but also long term.
Yeah, well, it comes back to funding and job security. It you realize that the short-term contracts are not conducive to stability in terms of, this is where I'm going to be probably because it's a bit of a lottery whether or not a grant gets funded or not. So seeking permanent employment, um, also realizing that you're not the most important person in the universe any longer, that there's someone else that relies on you wholly, and that you're part of a team. Me and my wife are part of a team, and that we needed to be there to support each other. That transition from having no children to one child is huge, psychologically, emotionally, physically, and navigating your way through that whilst also trying to do world class science and think about that next job. It's really, really challenging. So, again, that's where you really need those networks of people. The lab I was in Mariah's lab. There were lots of people of various ages and people that had been through it before or were going through similar thing at the same time. So that was really important. Yeah, it's tough. Again, you'll realize this, to be an academic science, to be, to do a PhD, to go and work in the pharmaceutical industry, you've got to be resilient. You've got to be able to take rejection of papers, of grants. You've got to pick yourself up, but you can't do that on your own. You need people to help you. Being honest with yourself and knowing when you need to ask for help, that's that's a really important skill, and not being frightened to ask for help. Now in my position as kind of an academic lead, I'd much rather people tell me about issues that are facing them so that I can help them navigate it rather than sitting there in silence, probably not working as well as they want to work. If I can help, I want to help. And that's not me being nosy, that's me being selfish because once they're through it, then they could be doing the science again, which is great. They can be developing their career, which is what I want to see.
Yeah, I think you've really touched on the idea that, like, I guess even if it's not just having a child, but having caring responsibilities, being
Yeah.
open and transparent about you are a person outside of your work. And I think people have the expectation that you can just separate work and life, but often they're interconnected. So if you're having someone supported to be able to communicate that can be really.
Yeah, especially around children, when children are born, especially first child, it's really difficult to see that someone's just tired. They really are tired, and it's not them. They've not changed. They're just probably tired, and just got to give them a little bit of slack. And that could be, if they're the mother or they're the father, or like your caring responsibilities, elderly parents. That's really stressful as well. And navigating your way through all of that, life is challenging, and just because you're a scientist doesn't mean that those life things don't happen. They do.
Very true. Everyone has something going on
Yeah.
behind the scenes, and it's. I think you talked about this in publicly how you sort of having to come in really early still, but you also probably hadn't been sleeping throughout the night because you now have
Yeah.
a child, and it's like you still expected to do really great research, but then also still be a really great parent at the same time.
It's a lot of pressure for everyone, and sometimes you're going to drop a ball. This juggling act, and it's being kind to yourself a little bit as well. Just saying, yep, some things aren't going to work out brilliantly. I've just got to accept that and roll with it, and not give up. Just keep trying.
Yeah, that's really great advice. So, as we're coming sort of to the end of this episode, for someone early in their career, or even someone in the middle of their career who's thinking about transitioning, perhaps a PhD student, a postdoc, or someone who's maybe in a completely different field, who's thinking about academia, what advice would you give them if they were, say, interested in going to where you were and doing the sort of things that you're doing?
Oh, what advice? Reach out to someone who you think can support you or give you advice. Um, I get occasional emails from people saying, I'm really interested in doing this. How would I do it? I'll always email back and say, well, I think you could do this. Why don't we have a conversation, on the computer, on Zoom or Teams or whatever? Have a chat. Um, find something that you're passionate about. I'd say I stumbled into pain research, and I did. It was because I wanted to learn a technique, really. Um, but the way I work, the way I get, why I'm passionate about what I do is that pain is a condition that impacts everybody, pretty much, except for a few families with a weird mutation in sodium channels. Um, it's a survival factor, but chronic pain is, it costs the NHS more than cancer and diabetes combined in terms of,
Wow.
its impact on society. It's billions of pounds a year just on the UK economy. And so there's something that, if only I can just try and improve our understanding of the way these things occur, why pain occurs, a little bit, that there might be some payoff down the line. So find something you're passionate about. Find a place that will enable you to do that research. So Nottingham, when I came to Nottingham, was we have great in vivo facilities. Pain's a whole body phenomenon. I knew I was going to have to do in vivo stuff, but there's also this fantastic imaging facility as well. So we've got magnets galore. We're going to have the Europe's biggest magnets soon,
Wow.
just up the hill from where we are. So I've got a research infrastructure around me that will support me in what I want to do. I've got colleagues here who are also researching similar things, like Vicky Chapman and Kim Chisholm, and the wider Arthritis UK Pain Centre, which means that there's lots of pain scientists and pain clinicians as well. So something you're passionate about, somewhere that will support you and enable you to do it, and reach out. Just send an email. Send an email, and if they don't reply first time, send it again, because we get lots of emails and things disappear at the bottom of the inbox. Um, give them a call. Go and see them at a conference or a meeting if you're at a meeting. Just do something you love if you
Yeah,
can, and
if you
that's where
can.
I've been lucky.
Yeah, great advice. And where can people go to learn more about you, your work, what your lab is doing?
I guess the university website, although it is being updated, that's one place. papers. I'm not very good on social media. Um, I don't think I'm interesting enough to try that, and I don't have the dedication to it. But those kind of places, LinkedIn occasionally. Um, yeah, that's one thing I'm terrible about. Self promotion is I'm very reserved, a bit shy.
Well, thank you for coming on here and talking so openly about your career in academia. It's been a really insightful conversation. I feel like I've learned so much about the sort of the challenges of navigating academia, but also sort of the highlights. So thank you again so much, Gareth, for taking the time to share your experience. And thank you for
Absolute
listening.
pleasure.
Well, thank you. And thank you for listening to Meet the Medicine Makers. This podcast explores the people behind how medicines are developed, all the way from academic research through to real-world impact. If you found this episode useful, feel free to share it with someone who might benefit, and you can find more details about Gareth's work in the description. See you in the next episode.